Okay, we're on there.
Calling order the council meeting of February 28th, 2024. Let's call the roll.
Ms. Zatra?
Here.
Ms. Weltman?
Here.
Ms. Godek? Here. Mr. Lemay?
Here.
Mr. Jensen?
Here.
Dr. Wong?
Here.
Please join me in pledging allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, brave souls who decided to come out in this weather to join us tonight. Our first order of business tonight is ordinance 2024-05. This is the acceptance of the NOPEC grant. Joe or Jim, you want to take us through this?
Thank you, Mayor. This is the NOPEC Energized Community Grant Program. We've received it in a number of years now. It's for any NOPEC member communities are allowed to use it for energy-related projects. And we have used it in the past for garage door openers, tube heaters, and different garages. The air conditioning unit down in the lower level here, a generator at service garage, LED signs that we did put up at the circle last year. So there's numerous things that we've used it for, and we are going to use it for. I believe most of it's going to go to the fire station this year for upstairs heating and cooling.
What's the size of the grant?
17,000.
Yeah, it fluctuates.
It fluctuates
Between
yearly.
17 to 24.
So it's 17 plus this year.
So this is just as long as we use it for energy, it's,
Yeah, and we've
Right.
used it, and we have it available through us. It pays us back. So when we do something, it's reimbursable, and we've used it all the way up until November. So
Okay.
if there's money available, we always try to find a little something to use it up. And
These generally reduce our energy costs as well.
yeah, that's the whole idea of the grant, is to be trying to save energy. So we did the light bulbs, all the LED light bulbs and all the traffic lights one year. So just trying to, anything that reduces energy costs.
All right, any more questions? Do we have a motion to suspend on this one, I think?
so moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Zatra?
Yes.
Ms. Weltman?
Yes, I just want to state that I prefer doing these on two readings, but yes.
Ms. Godek?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
And a motion to adopt 2024-05.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any further questions or conversation regarding this grant? Not hearing any. Roll call, please.
Ms. Zatra?
Yes.
Ms. Weltman?
Yes.
Ms. Godek?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Okay, thank you. And thank you to NOPEC for their providing us these funds, which we will put to good use. Next, we're going to turn to an update regarding the Shaker Boulevard Sanitary Sewer Project, Phase 2A, as it's come to be referred to. This deals with the connections, installation of septic sanitary conversions that will connect to the Shaker Boulevard trunk that was installed last year. We did have a meeting with the community residents who live on those streets last week. And Don, you want to catch us up on?
Yeah, the meeting I thought went pretty well with the residents that showed up. We went over just what to anticipate when we go through the connection process. We gave them some approximate numbers, and we are waiting for our final approval from EPA. And once we have that, which we do expect that in the next couple of weeks, we'll be at a point where we can give council final plans, specs, and cost estimate and move forward through the assessment process. So that's
At that point, we'll know a per resident assessment. approximately
estimated, yes,
Estimated,
right.
and it's on that basis that we'll pass legislation regarding the assessment. I just want to get the timing down.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
you'll have that estimated assessment number, and then you'll pass legislation for us to notify the residents formally of the assessment. So everybody will get noticed. We did send an invitation for all those same residents to come to a meeting, and
How
some of
many
them.
showed up out of, was it half or just
No, it
roughly?
was, we had a sign-in sheet, and sometimes it was, two people from the same house. I'd say maybe 15-ish people.
And residents are getting it, who will be affected, or how many roughly?
88?
88 homes.
Yes, 88 homes.
That's too bad.
Well, the residents that showed up were pretty enthusiastic about it. We
Okay.
had a lot of good questions, and we went through the process. And of course, a couple of them grabbed some stuff for the neighbors and things like that. So,
Okay. And the streets are
uh,
full.
Plymouth, Providence, Chatham, Brewster, Forest, and Edgewood, and
Concord.
yes,
Concord.
Concord.
Yeah,
right.
part of Concord.
And that totals only 70,
It's about 88 homes.
88 homes. Wow.
And you were able to give them a cost range?
We did. Yeah, we
Okay.
did our current cost. Right.
Did you hand out a PDF or anything, or like a?
We
document?
gave a handout, some maps and things like that. It was about 4 or 5 pages.
Could we get a copy? I don't think.
Sure.
Mhm. I'd like that.
Sure.
But you've not finalized those numbers yet?
No, we have a review process with the Ohio EPA. They've got our plans, and they've told us that they're going to give us final comments back here in the next
Okay.
couple of weeks. If there's something that's substantive that's going to change the cost, we'd want to make sure that we capture it.
Sure.
But I don't like to give that out until we've got their final from them. So
And then from there, come back to council approves, and then when do you bid this out?
well, it's got to go through that assessment process. So there's a notice procedure. There could be people that challenge the assessment
Okay.
with, assessment equalization board. So those things, if that happens, that adds time to it. If that doesn't happen, we could be, bidding it out in a couple of months, but it's probably more like 4 months from now.
What I'm driving at is just I want to keep this
Timing.
within the assessment number.
Yeah.
And so the surprise, you have an estimate right now,
Mhm.
and the surprise would come if you bid it out and you didn't get what you expected.
Right. Yeah, we had, obviously with the shaker, the first phase, we were kind of in the middle of COVID, dealing with some pretty unusual price fluctuations. I would say the fluctuations have stabilized. We're using higher numbers on our estimate.
Yeah.
So is really what it comes down to. And they seem to have leveled off.
And is the total cost based on the accessible value from the market study done last time? Are you hitting that number, or is it going to be above that number?
They were still within that.
You're still within that number. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Don.
Sure.
We're going to stick with Don for the next item. We had one of the abrupt emails come out of ODNR mid this month. Don, this would be for us to apply for any additional grant money to do this second half of Gates Mills Boulevard. Don, you want to explain? what
Yeah,
this involves?
This would be the piece from Lander to Cedar for the Gates Mills Boulevard Trail. It would be an extension of that. It's, as you recall, last time it took us, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of applying for funds from ODNR to actually get the funding. And even when we got the funding, it was probably 8 or 9 months after the time that we applied for it before we actually got notice on it. So, the max you can ask for is $500,000. Part of the reason that we broke the project up into 2 phases was that so we could ask for $500,000 twice, as opposed to just being able to ask for it once. So this would be the next logical piece, and I think it's got a reasonably good chance of getting funded. Whether or not we get funded this round or not, it's based on whatever competition is out there for the funding from ODNR.
And
phase, equal in length, longer, shorter?
It's a little bit shorter. It's roughly a mile. The other one's about 8,000 feet. There's an element at the end where you have to cross Cedar, where we have to deal with the traffic signal. So, you know, that adds some cost to it that we didn't really have with the first phase,
Mhm.
but it's still around the same dollar amount as the first.
When you
phase.
said 8,000 feet for the first phase, does that include the part that
Piece.
goes to Ursuline?
Yes. Yeah.
We have to deal with crossing Cedar?
Well, in some way, yeah. I mean, you're gonna have people end up there.
Right.
So now you got to give them some logical way to potentially either cross the street or go
Okay.
down Cedar, I guess. So
Okay.
Turn around.
no, I mean,
Why can't they turn around? Why?
well,
I mean, it's the end of
nobody's
Pepper Pike.
prohibiting them from turning around.
I mean, it's the end of our city. It's either
Yeah,
there.
well,
We're not going. There's nothing on the other side.
No.
actually, Mayfield Heights has
Right. They have
plans for their portion too.
Right.
So there's a handshake there, you know, so we have to figure out how that works. And we don't have it figured out yet. So at this stage, it's, you know, we're not going to spend any
Yeah.
real money on design, but we want to make sure that we have enough money in the budget for the ask to make sure that we can handle whatever we have to do there.
So we have to spend that money, correct? Because we have a time frame where we have to spend this grant money though? Because I know for whatever the reasons, it's not our city, they've hesitated, so I
Right.
know that was a challenge we had with with getting this grant. So I guess I'm sort of agreeing with Kathy, you know, why are we, until they decide, you know, why are we going to put too much money into it?
Well, they have a grant. So, you know, either they're going to have to return the money if they don't do something, or they're eventually going to have to go ahead and build their piece. But even if they don't participate in it, we would still want to build our piece to benefit our residents.
So you can hold the grant money indefinite. Well, that's what
No,
yeah. So how
again,
long could we hold the piece for that part? That's, I guess, what I'm wondering.
Well, we don't have the grant right now, so
I know,
there's nothing to hold.
if
But
we did.
but if we apply for the funding, there are timelines for us to reasonably follow through with it.
Okay.
I'm a rule follower, generally speaking.
That's
So,
good.
I
so,
agree.
you know,
I
so if we have a funding window, you know, we want to make sure that we hit it within that target. You can reasonably ask for extensions if there's something that transpires. I really have no idea how Mayfield Heights.
Yeah, I
continues to do
know.
that,
That's
and
what
that's
I
speculation
guess
on my part.
That's my point.
Right.
But, okay.
Right. So I, you know, I don't want to advise somebody as to how we could somehow game the system. 'cause
I don't want to
really-
game the
Right.
system. I just don't want to ask for money for something that
Right.
doesn't seem like it's happening, and it's not our place to say whether it should happen or not.
Right.
That's their decision. So that, I guess,
Right.
I'm just trying to make a point.
Yeah. Well, for me, and all I'm mentioning the intersection Cedar, it does exist, and there is another town that something's going to have to happen, even if it's just dealing with the fact that maybe a bike rider or jogger or walker
Like a
wants
crosswalk.
to
Yeah.
you know, get back onto Cedar Road. It could be something that's, from a cost standpoint, it could be very small.
Yeah.
But there is a signal there too. So sometimes there's a need to have the push
A button.
buttons and all that
Okay.
kind of stuff. And because of that, I want to make sure that there's adequate funding
Mhm.
on the ask, because I've included a number in there to handle whatever we might have to do with the signal.
Okay.
Don, I just want to be clear. So Mayfield Heights did apply for the grant and they were given the grant?
Yes.
before us.
Oh, and I mean, I thought at one time that they weren't even going to go forward with it.
As far as I know, they have not turned down the grant.
Okay.
So I don't, and again, I don't want to speculate as to how that's possible, but that grant, I think, is still in play for them.
Okay. And when did they get the grant? I guess that's maybe why I'm confused.
Before us.
Before us,
Yes.
long before?
I'm going to say
4 years.
pre-COVID
Oh,
Wow.
or thereabouts. Yeah,
So
2019 or
then
2020.
they kind of hesitated about whether they were going to do it or not. That's
From-
what I remember.
I guess the only sort of facts that I know, they've accepted the grant. That I know. They have not hired an engineering firm to do the design. And beyond that, I don't know.
That's consistent with what I know too.
I remembered that they had said that they weren't going to do it at one point.
They wanted to see what Pepper Pike was going to do.
Oh.
That was like their statement.
So I'd like to say, it's like, I like the project. I like the idea of doing the project. I don't like the mayor called it an abrupt email from ODNR. I will call it an abrupt adding of an agenda item before our meeting tonight that it hit at 1. I think that some of these things we could be much more organized and effective with. It's not a surprise when this grant is coming up. We've applied for it in the past. We know when that deadline is. I think that we could get readings in before a grant application and do it in a really transparent, clear manner that we know what we're getting and it's not rushed. So I don't love the timing of this. I've talked about it with other opportunities that have come up, and it seems to be happening again. And I can't just sit here quietly and pretend like it's not, because I looked it up. It's a March 15th deadline, which it's been for the past 4 years that we've applied. So
When did you find out about this?
We found out about it. It was brought to my attention last week. So, I mean, I'm aware that it exists. They have moved the date. One year they canceled it and didn't have a grant during COVID, which is hopefully an anomaly. The toughest part with ODNR is sometimes they drag out the awards to the point where they haven't awarded it, and then you're already into another year of application, which we
Right.
experienced with ODNR.
You did.
So, and they have a very small window to prepare the application. The thing is, they do allow a cushion on legislation. The legislation can follow the application, so they allow 30 days afterwards. So, if it's something that we want to do, but council wants to consider authorization, we can apply. And if council decides that they don't want to apply for the funding, we could just tell them to rescind our application.
Well, I
But
guess
you still
that's-
have another month. Basically, April 15th is the cutoff date for us to submit our legislation.
And I guess that's the point. I made it, I sort of stated it earlier when I said I prefer things on at least 2 readings.
Right.
And something like this, especially because I just think as a matter of due diligence, and also, it'd be nice to see what specifically we're applying for, what we're asking for. I know we're getting a certain sum of money for this project, I'm aware. And I know the application probably is quite similar to our previous application, changing a few numbers as far as maybe the distance of the trail. My concern is, I guess, just being able to go through a process of looking at it, sitting on it, having the community weigh in and see it, and the transparency that's involved with that. I know usually the process would be to do it even on 3 readings perhaps, and especially because it is a contract. And one thing I'm curious about, which we never really got to talk about last time, and is what our obligations are. Obviously, like that's one of them. Our obligation is to use the money within a certain time frame. But do we have any other obligations? Are we giving any easements? Is there any kind of transfer of ownership rights? Do we have to have any sort of guarantees to ODNR about, just the specifics? And if I could see the document, and I think if we could all see it, I'd feel like, I know it's probably nothing there of substance, but I'd feel like I was doing my due diligence just in case. I would be concerned if, for example, if we were giving an easement and we didn't know about it, that would be contracting something away without us really having the conversation. So,
Don, did I miss something, or did you say what the total cost would be? of
I
this?
did not say what the total cost would be. It's probably between $1 million and $1.2 million. We haven't finalized anything right now. This is just
Okay.
something. So we're
I mean, that gives us a.
yeah. The ask, we would
something to
ask
think
for
about.
the max that they would
Mhm.
give us, which would be the
Right.
$500,000. So
So it's million, so it would pay for half of it if we got the max.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
roughly.
we might be, and again, we end up, if you spend more on landscape and things like that, you could spend
Right.
more than that. But it's probably at least $500,000, probably $1,250,000. It's probably $1,250,000 total for my estimated number to give to them.
Okay.
So we'd be potentially $750,000.
Kathy?
So 2 things. One, I think, we're talking about walkability and we're improving our city. I think a lot of residents would like to see it happen, but I think we should think of two things. One, let's see how the first phase goes, learn from that and see how we can improve or change things for the second phase. And then two, there's a big hill on that part of Gatesville Boulevard. I'm not sure about the safety of bikes going down there, but it's pretty steep. So I'd like to see first how we would deal with that with the design factor. Do you know what part I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's
pretty steep.
it's no steeper than the hills on the other side. So I mean,
Yes.
they're manageable from
Right.
a steepness standpoint. I think this is a ODNR. It could be a couple years before we even get the funding. So, if we apply, if things go according to their schedule, the earliest that you'd be talking about construction is probably end of 25 or early or 26 is realistic. So it is a couple years out from now. If everything works out well, if we don't get funded and we go to the next year, you're talking several years down the road. So, you don't have to apply for it, but I think, it's one of those things. There is an opportunity. I think it's a good project. I think it's got a reasonably good chance of getting funded, and it is sort of a next logical step.
And would the width still have to be the 10 feet?
The width would be
Eight.
10 feet. Yes.
So by the
What-
time,
what-
the-
What we would do, and first of all, let me say, totally sensitive to what you're saying. Don doesn't disagree, I don't disagree. We're driven a bit by ODNR, and I understand, Emmy, you think, well, this is annually, it's about this time. We find out when we find out, though.
Well,
But I understand, and I am sensitive, and we regret, believe me, we had a conversation of great regret going, oh, God, now they tell us, and now we have to get this in front of council at the last minute.
well, my point isn't not to support the project. I don't know that it would even necessarily limit the project if we wanted to do it. It would be nice to have the grant money. I just want to know what I'm agreeing to when I take the grant money.
Understand?
I mean, we should know if we're like, are we giving an easement? Are
No,
we giving a right of use?
we've never.
I guess
yeah.
these are easy
Right,
questions.
right. And those are, I think of those types of things, those are all concerns. I think, they want to make sure that if they're giving grant money, that we're spending it on the actual
Well,
path.
that's
So there's a lot of
that's-
verification and things like that,
Obviously.
which we would do anyway. And there's some environmental documents, again, which things that we would do anyway. So there's really, probably the only thing is if you put a path in 2 years later, you decided to put a building on top of it, that would be a problem, because
I guess I'm more
Yeah.
concerned about the land.
yeah,
The land
we
is-
own the land. Nothing changes there. It's our, we're committing to maintaining it and keeping it functioning for a period of time.
just the fact that we've engaged the landscape architect and are moving forward with the first part sort of benefit our application for the second part, do you think? Or is it hard to say?
I think we've committed to being on a good timeline for the first part. I don't think that it's probably it's probably a better sign than whatever's going on in Mayfield Heights. But I don't think we've done anything that would necessarily help or hurt us on that.
And by the time this potential second part rolled around, got moving, the first part would theoretically be completed. So like to your point, Kathy, we would have like a stretch where we could say, okay, look at this. What do we like? What do we want to change? Right?
I think you'd have the ability to tweak things and
Okay.
modify things. Yeah.
As with all grants, these are very competitive, and there's nothing saying by applying that we get a grant.
Can you
Oh,
remind me the timeline we have currently for all of the walkways that are about to go into the city, just so I can get in my mind budget costs?
Well, the only one that's been committed to right now is Lander.
Lander.
And that's a 2024 project. So we haven't decided on which piece we're going to do next, but if we had talked in general terms of maybe doing, either Shaker or South Woodland next year, and then maybe doing the other one the following year, but they could both be done the same year. that's up to.
But Gates Mills is on the docket.
Gates
for
Mills
this
is
year.
on,
this
is
year.
to bid this year. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll probably finish landscape wise and everything will probably be spring of 25s. But the
So
paving,
it's a significant cost commitment. This, I mean,
yeah, and the, this will be, the goal is to have it, done by complete landscaped everything by the middle of 25. If you were fortunate enough to get the other grant, you probably wouldn't be bidding that out until spring of 26.
and just to clarify, we could tweak it, but we couldn't really change it too substantively. We're applying for a specific kind of path. So we have to be a little careful when we say we can't just take the money and change.
Well, it needs to be a path, right? But as far as the location or how it meanders and that kind of
The
stuff,
width, all those.
The
things.
width you're
Width
committing
has to be the
the
same.
width you're committing to, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a safety issue, but other parts of it, you do have flexibility.
And remind me, we didn't apply for an ODNR grant for the walkways on Lander, Shaker, and South Woodland because it wasn't going to be 10 feet. Is that right? And we'd have no chance of getting the grant.
Yeah, it's just a totally
Right.
different, it's not something that they would entertain.
Well, this could have been, I think we could have applied for a narrower, but we thought that, I think the thinking you're thinking, Don, was that it would have less of a chance of
They had
being
more
successful.
points.
Yeah,
more
it's-
So we
points.
could have gone for like 8 feet.
Right. You could propose whatever you want, but their goal is to make paths that are, safe and functional and operable. So you really hurt your chances of getting any funding if you do.
Yeah, because I remember we had that conversation because the Beechwood one is a bit narrower. So at one point,
Yeah, I don't think they had any funding for any of that. I think that was just a homegrown project.
homegrown project, yeah. So they're closer to 8 feet.
Okay. Well, thank you for the update on that. Appreciate it. Excuse me. Next, we are going to address ordinance 2024-03. Mr. Lemay made a small adjustment to it.
Yeah, the only change in this ordinance is removal of the brackets around accessory buildings, which is in paragraph C. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as we discussed at some length last time, till about 11:30. And it's been on our agenda for 2 meetings in December, 2 meetings in January, and the first meeting in February. Unless someone has any substantive change suggested at this point, I would like to go ahead and get this passed tonight. And so in that regard, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second?
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Acushnet?
Yes.
Mrs. Weltman?
Yes.
Ms. Bodett?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
And a motion to.
A motion to adopt? I'll make a motion to adopt.
A second?
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Acushnet?
Yes.
Ms. Weltman?
Yes.
Ms. Bodett?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Thank you all.
Congratulations, sir, you have your ordinance.
That's 2 this year, Rick. I'm on a roll.
This one will stick.
Yeah.
I think this one will stick. Next, we're going to have ordinance 2024.04 comes back to us this evening. This is the
Charter review.
Charter Review. Can't get the word out of my mouth. Charter Review Commission, Mr. Gentili, you made some changes, I believe.
I did another version and I just brought it here tonight because I was reminded that we shouldn't send these things out by email unless they go through a process. I don't think we get
Okay.
here in time.
Do you
So
have that?
I have a new version and a red line, if you could pass those around. And I have a few for the audience, if they wanted to look at it, if you
So,
could just
Tom-
pass those around.
Tony, you can always send those to Sheila and she can.
I didn't think I
distribute
would get it out in time from when
You can always-
I completed it. So let me go through this and the changes and keep losing my piece of
Tony,
paper.
is this yours?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so the changes that I've
Hold on,
made,
let's get around.
We haven't gotten it on our side.
you haven't gotten it
Sure,
yet?
Gentili.
Is it one page, Tony?
There's 2 pages, a red line and a red line and a non-red line. Yeah.
Easy when you're at the end.
Thank you.
Okay. So I removed I added the number and put in as amended, so we would realize that this is different from the first version. I removed the whereas regarding the proud residents of Pepper Pike, because that really wasn't a driver of why I'm proposing this ordinance. There were some people who suggested it, but the real motivation is, having read the charter many times and seeing how inadequate it is, was my motivation, and so I didn't want to have that in there. I changed in section 1 to having up to 11 residents in case there isn't the interest in this that we think there might be, and so that we can go forward with fewer than 11 residents. I heard several of my council colleagues saying that the 7 years was too long of a minimum for people to live here to be included, and I changed that to 3. I changed it to 4 on the version that you got earlier, but I thought about it more, and I think 3 is a better number. And then I added in the $5,000 budget and asked that the finance director appropriate that amount. This one has a June 12th deadline. However, reading Scott's letter to us, out of respect for my colleague and some others that have talked to me, I am going to ask that we do a 3rd reading at our next regular meeting. And I will, because of that though, I'll have to change the timeline. The June 12th will never happen if we don't pass it until March 20th. So I wanted to go over a little bit of why we're doing this, and we're not talking about a voluminous document. We're talking about excluding the table of contract contents, 7.5 pages.
The total charter is
The
700.
total and half outside of the table of contents, it's 7.5 pages. I went through it, and this may not be the final number, but I identified at least 22 word changes where the words are inappropriate. I identified 16 practices that we either are sort of doing or not doing or should be doing. The process is this, for those who don't really know. We would assemble the commission, and the commission would break into subcommittees to consider various parts of the charter in order to have some focus on those things, and then come together as a group and make recommendations to the group, and then the group would make recommendations to council. After council gets it, council would have to vote on whether those changes were things that they wanted to change. There may be more than one ordinance to do this because there may be different sections that needed to be changed, and I'm not sure of how that would work with the Board of Elections. And there would be open meetings on all this. Anybody can attend any of the meetings that take place in this charter review. And finally, to change the charter requires a vote of the electorate. And I just want to read that to you because I think maybe some folks aren't aware of how that works. And it's a short section, so bear with me. Amendments to the charter. The council may, by affirmative vote of at least 5 of its members, submit any proposed amendment to this charter to the electors, or upon receipt of a petition signed by not less than 10% of the registered electors of the municipality, setting forth any proposed amendment to the charter, it shall submit such proposed amendment to the electors. So the electors are the people who get to say whether this charter changes.
They're the voters, just so.
The voters, the electors, the voters, the people who voted for sidewalks and not for and against sidewalks. So that's how it happens. This council cannot make this happen by itself. It has to go to the voters. Okay. Council shall determine the matter and submission of any proposed amendment to the electors to the extent that such submission is not governed by the Constitution and laws of Ohio. If any such proposed amendment shall be approved by a majority of the electors voting thereon, it shall become a part of this charter, except that two or more inconsistent proposed amendments on the same subject shall be submitted at the same election. Only one of such amendments receiving the largest affirmative vote, not less than an emergency, shall become a part of this charter. So this charter review process, the charter amendment process rather, is something that has been provided for in our charter. It just hasn't been used. And I think that after, I don't know, I didn't do the math. I usually do the math, but between 1966 and 2023, I think that, or 2024 now, I think that it's time. So I hope everybody understands the process a little better. And I'll be coming back with a different timeline on the third reading. So I'd like to have all of the council be here to talk about it. And with Scott's absence, I think that the best to just call this a second reading and move on. I don't want to limit any discussion, but that's what I have to say.
Okay. Well, I know Scott he wrote us all a letter.
Yeah.
And so I know he appreciates your,
No, Scott made some
honoring his
good
request.
points, and the document that he found is extensive and is kind of voluminous, and I haven't really had a chance to study it, so it's worth the study. So I'll be back with you in March, on March 20th. And if there's any discussion, have at it.
I
Okay.
appreciate the changes, Tony. And Jim and I were talking before the meeting, and I think that we're talking sort of if you're trying to think about different elections and when this could potentially be on the ballot. And, this year's going to be such a mess. Can we just fast forward past November already? But since Pepper Pike has such an engaged electorate, I think whereas another community you might not benefit from having it in, whatever the spring election is. Here, if that's likely one of the, sort of big items that, everyone can give it more attention and have a real dialogue around it instead of it just sort of being another thing down at the bottom of the ballot,
Yeah, and that's a good point. On the other hand, though, one of the reasons that we wanted to put the walkability on the November
Right.
election was we knew we would get a good turnout.
Yeah.
Arguing against that point, which is just a different point of view and different positive, is that when we have a presidential election, we're going to get a lot of voters,
Yeah.
and so we'll get a lot of consideration.
Yeah.
I don't know, how much people will consider it one way or the other. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah.
So
To Tony's point, I think there was a lot of, encouragement to put that last legislation, the sidewalk advisory legislation, I guess it was, on the November ballot. And so, in some ways it's inconsistent. We were heavily encouraged to do it then because turnout would be so good. And so unfortunately we can't do it. To Tony's point, it's probably unrealistic. But I do think that initially it was the right instinct to put it on a major election. And yes, it might be busy, but we would have a bigger turnout. So, but it's where we are. I think it's most important to be respectful of our colleague and to do this the right way. So, I know this was a tremendous amount of work, even just, going through it again. And I appreciate that.
the only way I could see to get it on November, changing the timeline, would be to have a bunch of special meetings so we could have 3 readings. I think that any changes that we propose deserve to have 3 readings.
Yeah.
Right.
And so without a bunch of special meetings at the end of July, which is still maybe pushing it since we wouldn't pass this until March 20, that we're better off looking at the spring.
I think that I haven't been able to do the detailed dive into what Scott had us circulate yesterday. And all kudos to Scott for finding what looks like a very good document, guideline for how you do these things. But my impression reading it, and this describes a very robust public engagement about the whole thing, including the very formation of the commission itself, which is, something I think we ought to be looking at in this ordinance, is to providing more of a charge to the commission as to what is it that the commission is supposed to be doing. Because it's it doesn't really speak to that very much. And that was one of the cautions that you'll find in this guideline, that your commission needs to have a definite charge. What is it supposed to accomplish? How is it supposed to accomplish it? And when it described how it was accomplishing what it was doing, it talked about a lot of meetings. There's going to be a lot of meetings, and just on a scheduling basis, I can see where that's going to be challenging to, in a compressed time frame, get all of those meetings scheduled, attended to, and more, not just having the meetings, but having the opportunity of the commission to do the work that it has to do in order to evaluate things and, look to other subject matter experts or whatever to bring them in and speak to the commission. So
I think that
I think we need to just be realistic about it. That's all.
Yeah, and I think though there's one thing that I fear, and that is by making the charge too specific, it's almost like we've predetermined what changes are necessary. That's why I kind of wanted to leave it open-ended so that people could look at the charter, the various sections of the charter, and come up with what changes were necessary. I was afraid a little bit of, putting the cart before the horse. So we have to find a way to
But I think to that
split
end,
that.
yeah, I two comments. One is, again, I support the initiative, but having a better detail, like we talked about today, a little bit more of a process that lays out over our goals, not specific, but update old provisions, find best practices, general goals like that to bring the community along as to why we're doing this.
Mhm.
And then laying out a real process on how we're picking commission members, how they'll go about their work, interim reviews, public hearings. Just I laid one out for the sidewalk process. So something like that, just so everyone's brought along why we're doing it, how we're doing it, how it will happen, who's going to be involved, and making clear there's plenty of chances for public engagement at every step of the way.
Absolutely.
So
It's
if
supposed
we,
to be a completely open process.
yeah,
Well,
So
Always
having-
has,
but-
always has been.
but having that just laid out on a single page, I think would help everyone understand, like you just did, I think.
Can I do a 2-page resume instead of just a 1-page?
You can do one page. But the fact that you laid out how this process works was very helpful, because I don't think anyone understood. It takes a super majority of a council, not just 4, it has to be 5. Then it goes to, so it's a very well vetted process, but laying out how we'll get to that point would be helpful. And I have just one comment for your next draft
Okay.
on this, is in section 5,
Mhm.
in addition, I would love to adopt a process next time too. So and I'll help you with that if you're open to that. So we could adopt that as same time we adopt this. But the first sentence says solicit information from city officials, employees, and residents. Add to that, comma, other communities
Mhm.
and such other sources as it deems necessary. Because I don't want the commission limited to just looking at what we're doing. I really want them to look at other communities and find best practices communities that look like us, small, residential. And there may be things that we don't know that are just good processes that we could benefit from. So I
And
just
the
want to make
commission
sure.
may decide that there are things that we do and the way we do it that are actually better and
That's-
more efficient than the way
Absolutely.
other places.
That's
do
why
it.
it's called a review.
Well,
It's not by mandate a change. It's a
Right.
review.
No, no.
No,
It's a
and I
review.
think that's exactly the point. And I think, to Jim's point, it might not be that hard of a, or that complex of a document to draft. We're not reinventing the wheel. This is a common practice in so many communities and in many of our neighboring communities. Two, I know with certainty in our own school district, Orange and Moreland Hills. Both have recently done charter reviews. Also, I think Sugar Falls has recently done a charter review. So, and continues to review actually and amend. So I think that if we wanted to come out with kind of our kind of punch list that you were describing, Jim, and just kind of a general framework, we might be able to find that from one of these other communities and
Yeah.
use it as sort of, I'm not saying take it exactly
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
steal every word, but use it as a template to see
Yeah.
what worked.
I actually did,
This is
I
not a
actually did,
novel practice. This is
I actually
pretty
did that.
common.
I just didn't put it into the ordinance. Because I thought that the process needn't be a part of the ordinance, but
And
we can-
maybe
we
it
can
doesn't need to
see
be,
what we
maybe
can
we
do.
can just see an accompanying document.
Well, that's what I was thinking, accompanying doc, like, how will commission members be picked? Making sure that's very transparent, so everyone knows how that's being picked. A council review, I'm assuming it comes to council and we can amend it,
Oh,
change it.
absolutely.
So just laying all that out so the public knows it's.
See, that's a good point. You say absolutely, but that is not necessarily, that's informative, because it's not necessarily absolutely. So that's that's the approach. That's important that you laid out.
The commission only has the power, I think it's in here, to recommend
Recommend.
to council.
Yeah.
Council has the ability to put it on the ballot.
Right, to put on the ballot.
Right.
But I think that what's important is that council should decide and publish in its ordinance so that it's transparent, that it can change the recommendations of the commission,
Right.
other than just putting it on the ballot.
Right.
I think that's.
Well, we
That's
don't, as a
typical. That
council, we don't
happened.
have to accept the
I thought
the
that was part of
recommendations. We
what
can
the,
accept them in part.
And we all know that, but just as a matter of, if that's in our public process, it just helps
Right.
everyone else know that.
I guess the question is, does it belong? And that's a question maybe to see what some of these other ordinances look like. Does it belong in the ordinance or does it belong in an accompanying document? And that's just maybe form over substance. I don't know if it would look
I think we could adopt the process at the
Not
same
enough
time. It
ordinance.
just is attached to it.
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that the public is informed as to what it is that we're talking about that
exactly.
you may not have seen. What the guide that we're talking about is the 6th edition of the Guide for Charter Commissions, published by the National Civic League. And it's something Mr. Newell had found and had circulated to council prior to this meeting.
And it is excellent.
One thing that I would point out for council's, consideration, since you all haven't had a chance to read it yet, but you ought to be thinking about it now. On page 13, and I'm going to read this paragraph because I think it's very important. Special mention should be, and I'm quoting here, special mention should be made about the role of local elected officials. While in many cases, the mayor and/or council plays a role in the appointment of commission members, the involvement of elected officials should end at that point. The charter process functions best when it is rooted in citizen involvement rather than one influenced, intentionally or unintentionally, by political officials directly serving as members. In some cases, the commission's recommendations go back to the council, as in here, which has the authority to decide whether the proposal will go to the people for a vote or may determine the final language of proposals. Still, the commission should do its work independently and give the council and the voters its best thinking about charter change. I think that's really good advice for many reasons at many levels. But I'm glad you think it's an excellent document because that's what it says.
Obviously, we just got this document.
No, yeah.
It's a paragraph,
And-
it's a
and-
paragraph out of context.
and-
I'm not sure, but I'd also like to see what other
And-
communities do and effectively do.
And,
in our
and
state.
this is a document that goes nationwide, including to very big cities that are politically polarized with parties having bickering against, so you got to take it in context, Rick, about that may not apply to, or may not apply as robustly to Pepper Pike, where our founders, thank God, made it nonpartisan in our elections. And so we don't suffer all the ills that other cities may suffer that would drive that result.
And,
That's
and our neighboring communities might feel similarly.
Well, I
hope.
believe for sure that Orange had council
Exactly.
members on the commission, on their commission or
And
committee.
I believe more.
And I don't remember for sure about Moreland Hills or
I
Chagrin
can't,
Falls.
I can't
But,
remember it though. I
you know,
can't
there's-
remember.
I'm
more than-
simply,
Yeah.
because we're getting back in a month about it, I want to make sure everyone is at least aware that that's in this document
Gotcha.
for when you get to it.
There's lots of other good stuff in that document.
There's lots of good stuff.
Scott, when we got that yesterday, I spent last night reviewing it, and I took some notes of some highlights. It really is good. I do think we should all engage and read it, and anybody who's thinking about serving on the commission, I think should too, because it really is some nice framework there. Tony, I want to say thank you. I appreciate the changes that you've made in this. You listened, you were thoughtful, you're just making this better. I also I wouldn't have minded 2 readings on this, but I'm excited to go to 3. I think that if we're going to go through the process of doing a charter review after 50 plus years, let's get our process right. Let's do it the right way. It's something that I have been very into, I guess, for lack of a better term. I like our processes being good, and I think that this is such an opportunity for us to really get it right. So thanks for all of the hard work that you're putting into this.
Thank you, Amy.
I appreciate it.
I think, not by way of excuse, but by way of reason, I was maybe too focused on November, and thought we could, really go after this and get it done. But if we have to wait till March, that sort of seals it.
Well, in fairness to you, we were hearing volumes about the value of doing an election in November, and
Yeah.
but I'm comfortable with either one as I was last time.
There is no regularly scheduled election next March or May.
Okay, well, I mean, we can always pay for one.
Yeah, we could choose to put one on and bear the
I
cost
think
of
that
that
would
if
be
we were
in
to choose.
May.
Pardon?
It would be in May when they have.
Okay. Yeah, we have to follow the Board of Elections too, so.
And
Mhm.
how does it work cost-wise? If somebody else puts something on, how does that?
You could be splitting it with, you have district, if you're in the same district as somebody, so that all the poll workers are there for both communities. If it's just you, or if it's you and North Olmsted, you're each going to have to pay for your elections
Yeah.
because they're going to have to
Okay.
fully staff the polling place.
You should, as we do this, we should, other than, other broader, whatever changes, I think this monetary number is going to prove to be pretty low. We're going to have to pay for, people like Steve. This is a special project for him. So, he has to attend these meetings. So I just think 5 is going to prove to be low. We can
Okay.
try to get better judgment as to how much that number should be.
I was only thinking about, kind of the administrative and the secretarial work that would need to go into it. But I'm happy to increase the budget.
Okay.
What do you think's a better number? 10?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but 5 is like one mailing almost. So it just seemed pretty
Well,
shy.
I'll change it to 10 and then we can, if it proves to be inadequate, we can just
What was the mailing? Was it 5 for the
The mailing was,
citywide mail?
38.
about 3.
it was closer to, it was
was
between
about-
3 and 4. I don't
It
know.
was about 3.
For the flyer we sent out
3,200,
with the Q&A.
if I
Right.
remember.
of the sidewalks.
Right.
Okay. We'll need to do that at least once for
At
that.
least once.
Yeah.
And probably more than once.
Yeah.
Well, that there are, you have an option. The legal requirement is either copies of what you're sending out or publishing in the newspaper. That is an option. I understand in terms of the likelihood of people reading it, mailing it to voters is probably the
Well, we need,
Better way
we
to
need
go.
the one mailing at least to get the candidates who
Right.
want to be on the
right.
committee.
I'm thinking more of the end of the process.
At the end of the
You
process-
have to publish the proposed charter amendments in the newspaper or mail to the home of the registered electors.
Well, there's precedent for this because we have changed the charter. We haven't done a full review, but we have changed it in the past. We can look back and see what we did. It was changed in 2012, I believe.
Right.
That might have been the last time.
2012, we changed the charter.
That might have been the last time. So we can look back and see what we did then and see if it's still appropriate. So thanks.
Yeah, we've changed our whole method of communication since we did that.
Yeah, we don't have to post it on the little boxes.
Right, we don't have the boxes anymore.
Ordinance boxes on telephone poles.
Right?
I remember
We should take
those.
those out of
I
the
remember
charter.
them too.
Take those out of the charter.
Now, that would be a worthwhile edit, although maybe a little sad.
I don't think they're in the charter.
No, I didn't see it.
If they were, we should take it out.
I think they're actually there. Maybe it's just in an ordinance, maybe in an ordinance.
Maybe, yeah.
All right, we're going to move on to, we'll consider that heard for second reading. And we're going to move on to our committees. Mr. Lemay, you had conducted a finance meeting tonight.
We had a finance committee meeting tonight, first month financials. So not a lot of to tell you about trends or changes, but we're on track. The city's financial condition continues to be very, very strong. So that's all I have to report.
We had a good first month.
We had a good first month.
All right. That's all, yeah, that's all the committees. We don't have a planning commission meeting this Monday, right? There will be no planning commission meeting because of a lack of applications for it. Moving on to the department heads, you gentlemen have anything you need to?
No, nothing special.
Okay. I don't have anything that I need to talk about tonight, I don't think. So, council, you have anything?
I was going to bring up the calendar. Again, I wasn't sure if anybody got the email that I sent in error to everyone. But if you had a chance to look at it, the proposal for November, I put in writing and the reason why, just so that we can be better organized and better prepared. And I also suggested that perhaps in one of those meetings, and I did read, I want to make sure I understand. Joe, for the annual budget meeting, is it a 45 days before that we have to have that before the end of the year? Or
No.
does it not?
45 days for the submission by the
Yes.
administration.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't,
Which is why it's November 15th.
okay. I wanted to make sure I wasn't unintentionally goofing up a process that I wouldn't want to interfere with. But I don't believe this is anything we have to vote on or do anything. It's more just a placeholder in the back of our minds for what will be coming given November and December.
What would be the process for pulling that trigger though to do that? You want to just put them on our calendars so we have
I'd
the
like
time
to have
slot
them,
reserved?
like, that we know what the dates are that we would potentially meet.
Okay,
And if, like I said, if we don't need these meetings, then we don't meet, kind of
Okay.
like the planning commission. But I think for transparency and ease of scheduling, if we know, okay, these are our target dates for meetings in November and December, if we'd like to have to get readings in, we have it.
Yep.
Tony.
Well, listen.
I mean, I think, this is really good and really helpful. And I'm going to say right now that we won't do Christmas.
That was, right?
And so,
Hey, I'm bringing in Chinese food.
I think City Hall is
No problem.
officially closed on Christmas Day, though.
so
Sit outside.
So maybe we can officially change December to the 11th and the 18th. And I would say it's very, very likely that we won't do the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So maybe we want to think about just changing the calendar ahead because those days are, well, one is virtually impossible. The other is very,
Just
very unlikely.
because they fall that way this year,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we just go ahead and do that?
I would be comfortable with that. I don't know if there's any reason that we can or cannot.
How do
We are going to have a year-end meeting. It's obviously not going to be on Christmas. I'll eat my fried rice by myself, I guess. But we will be here at the end of the year because we have to do a budget reconciliation at the end of the year. And until those final numbers come in, it's challenging just to guess at what those final numbers are gonna look like.
Well, perhaps
So
the
we can
18th and the
pick-
29th.
We can maybe pick a date
29th.
as to, well, I want
Sunday.
Joe to consider it and think about it. This is when he'd be comfortable that the
Yeah, I'll
date,
look
because he
at
knows
that.
when his
Check runs. and
last
everything.
check runs are. So-
Okay.
It almost,
Yes,
it almost has to be the 30th unless it's going to be during the day on Christmas Eve, I mean, New Year's Eve.
Well, it could be 26, 20, I mean, there's some,
New
26,
Year's-
27th or the 30th,
There's
right?
probably some traveling though.
27th, yeah.
There's
Yeah,
probably
right.
some traveling.
Yeah.
at
Right, right,
Christmas time.
But I agree, and I appreciate that you've done this. I think we need to pick a date.
I agree,
If
and-
we want to be flexible and do it later in the month, I'm okay with that, but I think that we should have these dates on the calendar.
Yeah.
That way we know, we can plan, and also the community can plan if they're interested.
All right, let's,
Joe, could you pick some, like, is that reasonable? Could you choose something? Like, if you were to look at the check runs and get back to us next month and
Sure,
we could,
absolutely.
like, and then let's just set it. And that way we can all go on and plan our holiday time.
Good.
And be effective. I want us to do our job, but be predictable.
Well, and this
Then
is
we-
actually causing a problem with the meeting falling on Christmas.
Yeah, it's just where the
It's-
calendar is this year.
It would be the date, that would be the end of the month date, and clearly
Yeah.
that's not happening, so we might as well know what that date.
yeah, it's a real thing that we can identify now with Christmas. So,
So do you want to pick, I mean, set the 13th and the 20th for November then, for the same reason
13th and 20th.
of November?
Because the
let-
27th is the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, in my opinion, those would be our two meetings. We would not meet the day before
I
Thanksgiving.
think December is open until we hear from Joe.
let's talk about it next month. I've
Let's
got
reconvene
some
it.
dates too.
Yeah, thank you
But-
for entertaining the idea, everyone.
And thank you for doing this, because we have the problem every year, and why not anticipate and deal with it, right? You know, so.
Right?
Mhm.
And then everything, you guys can all come join us.
All right. Are there any audience comments?
Oh, I have a quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
Do
ahead.
you know when we're gonna hear back from the architects? Are they gonna come next meeting to present anything? For the Gates Mills, sorry.
No,
The landscape architects.
no, they're
No.
nowhere,
Nowhere near.
they haven't picked a pencil up yet.
Oh, okay.
I wish they had, but they haven't even picked a pencil up. So, all right, anything else? Audience comments, anything? Yes, sir.
Mind if I stand? Is that cool?
No, you can always stand. up.
Awesome. I can stretch my legs. I've been sitting all day. William Thompson, 300-30500 Providence. I have a couple notes on my phone. I'm a big fan of the phrase, do the right thing the right way. And I want to say I feel much, much more comfortable with what I'm hearing tonight as far as doing the right thing the right way, as opposed to leaving here feeling very, very skittish about this last week. I thank the mayor's comments too about, I know you say of course, but it doesn't, or say absolutely, but I learned many times that when you don't give somebody information that you have in your head, my wife and I talk about this, right? Don't give somebody information that you have in your head, you let them assume what's true when you know that you're thinking something else. So I cannot understate the need for clarity and transparency in something. Keep everything above board, right? Just reduces the stress level all the way around. It can be a much more productive, much more productive conversation. I'm much more heartened by tonight's meeting. I left last week, if I'm honest, feeling very, very skittish. So thank you for that. I was thinking about the November, because they were dead on, like the November election is a good idea because of the amount of turnout. But I'm thinking, what's different about this November? And you laugh because you know what's different about this November, right? The amount of stress in the world, and maybe the world, in our country about the presidential election is going to suck up every ounce of political oxygen everybody's got from now. That was not the case last November when it was city council elections, right? Which certainly take up people's mental energy, but I don't know that it's the level of daily, I just want to be done talking about this, that we're going to go through this year. I think Councilperson Godek mentioned something like that. But, so I don't want to burst the bubble, but love the suggestion of next November. I'm not trying to stall it in any way, shape, or form, because I will wholeheartedly support the notion. I think a review needs to happen. But I also really like the idea of a November election too, for the reasons everyone's stating. I don't know, it'd be disappointing and not as much fun to have to wait. But I think there's some value in just sleep on it. You know, think about November 2025, because think about this, we're gonna have, what, 4 seats up for reelection. I think turnout in November 2025 is gonna be high, to just food for thought. And thank you for sharing the document, this is my last point. Thank you for sharing the document about the charter review. I'm glad that somebody nationally has thought about this, and I just wanna challenge that. I'm not sure that it's fair to kind of summarily dismiss a paragraph in it, giving, I think, sound advice on, hey, not sure council members should be present. We can all conjecture why you think it's there, but to be fair, you don't know why it's there. So please be very, very careful in dismissing something that we all say is a section of because you think it's there because of red versus blue or why it's there. Because I can just as easily say, look, if I'm on that commission and the mayor is present, or Mr. LeMayor is present, or Ms. Weltman is present, I might just instinctively defer to them because I see them as elected official. I don't want to get on their bad side. Whereas if they're not in the room, we feel much, much more open. At work, we do this all the time. We have meetings with just a team, no managers. They're not allowed in the meeting. Why? Because when the manager gets in the room, everybody's tenor changes and they're quiet. They don't say things they want to say because there's leadership in the room. So I just ask, please consider that. And if we seem hell-bent on having council members in that meeting, then I ask you to ask yourself why. Because if we trust our hiring process and vetting very smart, intelligent, passionate people to be on that committee, let them do their job. You put good people in a place to do good things. Trust them. And I don't know who's going to be on it. Trust them that they're going to do the job that you, and because it's going to come back to you anyway, right, for review. So that's all I have to say. I try to keep it brief, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. You stand adjourned. Got you out of here, Ken.
Sort of balances everything out from last week.
4 hours early.